Joining me here this morning for the first seminar of the day at the Hospitality Technology and Innovations Forum. It's 9 a.m. and it's Thursday, the 28th of January, 2021, nearly February. I hope to be able to spend the next 30 minutes sharing some of the interesting things that I've learned over the last year, whilst the hospitality industry, like everybody else, has been living with the effects of the coronavirus. I'm really happy to take questions throughout. So as Liz said, do feel free to pop any questions into the question and answers or comment box below. At least I'll know someone's listening if someone does that. So just to introduce myself, I'm Jane Pendlebury. I am the CEO of HOSPA, the Hospitality Professionals Association. We're a UK-based association for the industry, and our members are typically senior hospitality professionals involved in finance, revenue management, technology, marketing, and asset management. Throughout the pandemic, we supported our members through webinars and sharing information on our website via our email and our monthly magazine, the overview. And I had conversations every day with hoteliers and other operators in the sector. And as HOSPA, we have tried to support them with advice, the sharing of experiences, and creating best practice. We also ran our annual conference in November, and believe me, that was a roller coaster of emotions as we navigated our way through the ever-changing guidance and restrictions. It was a great opportunity to ask questions of our virtual delegates, and I will share some of those answers with you shortly. I would also share some of the highlights from the presentations as well. I will also talk to you excuse me, about some of the anecdotal feedback that I've had through the last 11 months that has helped me understand the need for flexibility in technology during a crisis. So this is a little image here from the conference, which was broadcast live from the studio at the Royal Lancaster Hotel. I could do a whole presentation on that technology alone, but that's not the remit for today. But suffice it to say, we broadcast live. We had a maximum of 30 people in the room. The rest of it was broadcast out on the internet through the app. And here you can see, this is me interviewing David Pride, who's the technology manager at the Strand Palace Hotel, and also Rob Payne from BT. We had sessions running throughout the day. And we had three specifically about technology. The first was all about guest contact in a socially distanced world. And the second was a case study of an implementation of a core piece of technology that was implemented during lockdown. This was actually Callum McIndoe from Infor talking about their rollout to Apex hotels. And the final session was this one in the picture, and it was about understanding our guest behaviour in order to maximise opportunity. So we asked the audience of mainly hoteliers, but also the wider hospitality operations, what they saw the main function of technology is for them, what the main reason for having it. And half of the audience said it was to free up staff from administrative tasks to focus on providing a better customer experience. So I guess being in hospitality, that rings true for a lot of us. Just under a quarter of the delegates wanted to capture data to understand guest behaviour, and 15% wanted to reduce staff turnover through investment in technology. And finally, 1 in 10 saw the best use of technology was to better market the property's facilities and services. So I guess we had a wide-ranging audience. There were corporate chains down to individually privately owned hotels. So there was quite a wide range of people being asked all those questions. In conversation with Andrew Evans from Keystep and Andy Evers from Red Carnation, which was one of the sessions, the Hospice delegates learnt that Red Carnation hotels, like other UK-based, London-based chains, just opened a handful of properties, boosting their occupancy, and directed all the guests from all the hotels to the few, allowing some to remain closed and just a handful remaining open. So there was a lot of new bits of technology there, from sharing guest data across the portfolio hotels, which everyone probably does anyway, but it was never as important to get it right as this time. So technology changes were made to do this. However, Andy did advise against making rash decisions on technology during the crisis. His philosophy was that anything he spends money on needs to have relevance post the pandemic. He advised not to invest in flash in the pan technology that will quickly become redundant. He did say that, as per the title of this presentation, some plans were strategically accelerated given the new world that we're now living in. Rollouts that were initially due to take 2 to 3 years had been squashed into a 2 to 3 month window to enable them to carry on functioning in the new way of operating. He strongly advised against rushing any decisions and was saying time and time again that IT investment must add value. I think there were a lot of small companies popped up during the virus to help with various things, but it was very important, according to Andy, to make sure that we looked at those strategically and looked at the bigger picture. And we did obviously learn that QR codes made a comeback. I'm going to cover that a little bit more later on. But whilst on the subject, Andy said that in luxury hotels, the theatre of presenting a leather-bound wine list will never be permanently replaced by a QR code, but they have had to do that in the short term. It's maybe the only option in the short term, but choice going forward seems to be the key to success. So perhaps it will still be available through an app, through a link, but I suspect, especially in somewhere like Red Carnation, they will bring back that leather-bound wine list and menus and all those little bits in the restaurant and elsewhere in the hotel. I've always said this, well, not always, in the last 5 years or so, I've been saying how the role of an IT director has changed so much in the last 5 years or so, and they're becoming ever more commercial. And no longer are they just there to fix the IT and make sure that all the bits are connected, but now they need to think more like salespeople and worry more about the guest needs than they may have ever done previously. And this came to the fore, obviously, during the coronavirus pandemic. Going back to the surveys that we conducted with the Host-based delegates, we asked if they had relied more or less on technology during the pandemic. A fifth, amazingly, said nothing had changed. Maybe they were just closed. But the remaining 80% said they had relied more heavily on technology. And of those that had relied more heavily on the tech, nearly 60% of them said that the major benefit was just automating processes that previously had been done manually. The remaining 40% said that helping manage the operation with fewer staff on site was the overriding advantage of technology during 2020. Again, I assume that the different business models dictate different demands of each business. I know we've got a vast range of people in the audience today, so everybody has different ideas on what's important. But we always have to consider the use of technology and the data that we are accumulating as a result. And that fed on very nicely later in the day when this one that's on the picture here, Rob Payne from BT emphasised the need to use any data that you are collecting. It's not only a waste of time and energy to gather data that's not being used, but it's also a breach of GDPR to store that data that is if it's neither relevant nor necessary. There's a lot I'd like to say about the technology we used on the day of the conference. So if anyone would like to know more about this, please do contact me afterwards. That's a quick summary of what we learned during our conference, but perhaps where we learned more last year was through our webinars. We ran more or less weekly webinars during the first lockdown, something we thought we would never do, quite honestly, because HOSPA is usually all about face-to-face networking and just chatting and anecdotal conversations and meeting people, and usually involves a glass of wine as well. So doing a webinar was a completely different thing for us. But we embraced it, we carried on, and we were absolutely overwhelmed by the number of people that were interested in listening to the webinars as well. So that was very encouraging. We need to maintain our open discussions with members. So we look forward to doing that face to face. But in the meantime, webinars such as these are dominating what we're doing these days. In May, one of our webinars was entitled Less Contact, More Engagement, which was all about ensuring guests were still communicated with, despite the fact that hotels and restaurants and pubs and clubs weren't open at that time. We had a very distinguished panel that day, one of whom was Julie Grieve from Crichton, and the advice from her was to ensure that the conversations started very actively prior to the guest arrival through their mobile phone. Crichton create apps for hospitality businesses, and in a very, very simple terms, if coronavirus wasn't the catalyst for uploading your guest directory onto an app, then when would it be? Yeah, communication was key, but also very practical, that once you were in the hotel, no longer did you have to flick through another probably leather-bound piece of literature to find what time breakfast was. It's all on the app. Julie's comment about communication was backed up immediately by Andrew Evans from KeyStep, and his business is in supplying mobile key, using the guest's own mobile phone as the key to their bedroom or any doors that they need to go through. And surely, if anything is going to be in great demand during this contactless world that we're living in, mobile key is definitely one of them. But that was one probably that, like Andy Evers referred to during Hotspace, that was worth pushing through during the lockdown. And again, going back to the title of this presentation about the acceleration of technology, they must apply to both companies like Crichton with the mobile app, and KeyStep with the mobile key. We also had James Satter, who was then with Agilisys, and he was keen to point out that both of these excellent initiatives were great for promoting loyalty. So he was coming from the loyalty point of view, and another tick in the box for encouraging direct bookings, which we obviously all embrace where we can. The host, be that the hotelier or the restaurateur, has as much detail on the guest as the guest is prepared, willing to share, and it's up to the host to use that to their advantage and for the enjoyment of the guest, which is why it's so much better if they book direct, because you're much likely to get more information from them directly and then be able to tailor their visit to your establishment based on what they've already told you. There were lots of comments during that webinar relating to temperature taking and how best to approach it. And the bottom line on that was it's very important to train staff not only the right approach for taking the temperature, asking permission and generally just making it as subtle as possible, but also, and perhaps more importantly, how to handle an unfavourable result, which I think a lot of people, first off, just missed how they were going to deal with that if it happened. Hopefully those have all been corrected now. And on safety measures, as in the temperature taking, it's just as important to look after staff as well as guests. Pete Willis from Harry was keen to point out that staff need to feel confident going back to work. When we ran this webinar, it was while the properties were all still closed before the July 4th opening. But to that end of encouraging confidence within staff, Harry developed an employee health checker app, which is, I think, a great reminder for everyone. We're all so focused on the guest, but it's very important not to forget your own teams as well. Excuse me. So looking after your employees through the app is obviously a very important thing to do, and to make them feel safe whilst they're working in your establishment. I did mention QR codes earlier, but I said I'd mention again, they certainly made a comeback, didn't they, during 2020. Driven partly by the pandemic, but also I think the ease of now reading a QR code. Most mobile phones, smartphones, will now do this directly from the camera. No need for a specialist app, which you used to need. And those QR codes came to the fore, especially in food and beverage. It was their natural home for room service menus, restaurant menus, ordering, paying, and maybe even for finding your seat. whilst either being served or waiting for your takeaway. Everything could be communicated through clicking on the QR code and getting the information directly to your own handset, your own mobile phone. So QR codes became suddenly very popular again. And along those lines as well, QR code's great. We also, not so much tech, but we put in the one-way systems. And a lot of those, they should still be in place now. And of course, we had to take away the breakfast buffet. And one wonders if that will ever make a comeback. And I think that it will, maybe just served slightly differently, maybe behind screens and with actually hotel staff putting the food onto the plate for you and then handing that over. So no longer can we have strange combinations on our plate without wishing to humiliate ourselves with the hotel staff. But in short, hoteliers and restaurateurs had to minimize anything that their visitors may touch, and not only increase the visibility of cleaning, but actually make sure that all hygiene practices were reviewed and then strictly adhered to. And again, this was harder in some and easier in other locations, depending on the building and the size and the number of staff and all sorts of different variations there. That panel ended with a warning, really. They were all involved in promoting the increased use of technology, but they all warned against not losing the personal touch and the warmth of a personal welcome. And we went on to the subject of chatbots, and everything that they can do in theory and on paper can be amazing, but nothing replaces that welcoming smile, that human welcoming you into the establishment. And it's not likely that bots, certainly in 20 and 21, are intelligent enough to recognize the full range of emotions that a guest may be experiencing. And I'm yet to be convinced that a bot will really be able to effectively deal with guests' fear, frustration, anxiousness, nor can a bot share the joy of a happy guest. Maybe in time they will get that intelligent, but at the moment, not so. I do have a question here, and just to break it up a bit, I'll have a quick read. The hospitality industry is notoriously slow at embracing technology. Why do you think that is? And do you think the impact of this pandemic will accelerate the tech? Absolutely, it will definitely accelerate the tech. And yes, I think we do have a reputation for being slow at embracing technology, especially compared to banking, even retail, although I'm not sure they're as good as those of us in hospitality might think they are. I think they also have struggles embracing it. I think the answer mainly to that question is we're getting there. It's certainly been accelerated. But as my point just then about taking care of the guest, offering a hospitality personal service is crucially important. And that could well be why we haven't rolled out the tech maybe as fast as other industries might have done. And I also remember years ago, in my own experience, I was selling a piece of tech to a hotel, nearly had the deal. It was a revenue management software very early on in the life of revenue management, so in the early 2000s. And the budget suddenly switched from this piece of IT into replacing a carpet at the front of the hotel. And they no longer were able to invest in the revenue management system for a few months and after that, because the money had literally been spent on a carpet. So yes, that's the hospitality industry. Going back to our webinars, the delegates in the webinars, probably not dissimilar today, are a canny lot. And we had lots of questions on integration, PCI compliance, and GDPR, all of which as IT people in the industry, we have to be very, very aware of. But thankfully, the only ones I need to address today is the integration question. And I would just say, simple as this, I'm all for open and robust APIs, and they are definitely the way forward. And where possible, not to charge customers, the end customers, for that integration. That's been a big hurdle to overcome in the past with some of the suppliers that they don't want to integrate to other people. But I do believe we're moving forward on that. And yeah, robust open API is the answer. In July, we ran another technology-related webinar, this time on delivering a human touch in the contactless world. So not dissimilar to the previous one, but by this time the hotels were open again. We had Tom from Ennismore, along with Alan O'Riordan, who was then with our Paleo, and from Alliance, where Alan now works, we had Tristan and Andrew sharing their views. And once again, communication with the guest was the top of the list of must-dos. And Tristan from Alliance was very keen to point out that technology is the key to success, but not by bombarding the guest with technology. Technology must be an enabler, a support tool. And going back to the comment I just made on bots, the human touch remains crucial. Alan emphasised the increased ability to gather a 360-degree view of our guests, and that gives hospitality hosts a clearer idea of how to treat each guest individually. So that personalisation piece, which has been so popular in the last, well, probably couple of years, personalisation has been a bit of a buzzword. One key benefit of technology is delivering business intelligence to enable a good strategy, not least ensuring the right staff are in the right place at the right time, and crucially with the right information in order to answer the guest queries, but also know as much as they can about that guest to give them the best possible experience. An interesting statistic shared by Alan was that typically 56% of the average, this is hotel specifically, average hotel's IT budget was spent on support contracts, which doesn't really leave a lot for innovation. And the point on that is to use your money wisely. Kiosks, robots, cleaning public areas, smart speakers in bedrooms, one or some or even all of these might be the right solution for your property, but they certainly aren't for others. And things like the kiosks, brilliant, but of course now posing a bit more of a touch risk, and the cleanliness of kiosks, because we probably all see at supermarkets, is something that, whilst you were saving a member of staff before potentially by using a kiosk for checking in, arrival, that sort of thing, maybe now not so much, because there's somebody there cleaning after each guest has checked themselves in that kiosk. You just have to think whether it's the right solution for your own property. Undoubtedly, they all have their place, but not all things for everyone at all places, really. And I think the other point that's really important and close to probably all of our hearts is that cash is very tight at the moment in the coffers of any hospitality business, and investing in technology probably isn't the top of the list for finance directors. However, it is worth looking at the ROI, the return on investment, because quite often there is a quick return on investment, but there are other options that when spending money that a lot of people are missing. Did you know, for example, you can claim research and development tax refunds? We did a presentation to our members from BDO, a large firm of accountants who we work very closely with. And during that presentation, we asked how many of the delegates were taking advantage of cash incentives from HMRC in the form of tax reductions or actual cash back in some instances to support investment in innovation. It doesn't have to be actually developing the tools either. It can be just implementing there and doing something innovative with them. But a lowly 7% were making R&D cash claims from HMRC. And yet, so 7%, so 93% weren't. And yet 68% of that same audience said that they would be investing in new technology as a direct result of COVID or wider plans. So that's a really interesting one. If you are trying to get some money from the business to spend on IT, then it's definitely worth pursuing not only the return on investment, how quickly that can be turned around, but also whether you can make claims to relieve the tax burden as well. Sounds like money left on the table, doesn't it? So I'll happily make introductions to the experts at BDO to find, if you want to find out more. So please do just let me know. I'm sure they'd be very, very happy to hear from you. One of our webinars, we had Richard Harrison from Coombe Abbey, which is a beautiful country hotel. And his word of warning was, don't underestimate how tech savvy even our senior guests are. In his experience and in his opinion, there was little resistance or reluctance from the older generation to use tech in his hotel. I think we all have this image of it being the millennials, but choice is paramount, and that still rings true from the wine list and the QR code or the leather bound one. But give your guests the choice, how they want to engage with you, how they want to engage with the tech. Give them an alternative if one of the options you're offering isn't what they're looking for. Hospitality, make your guests feel special. The key things is just that guest, make sure they want to come back, increase that loyalty. So I see we're getting towards the end. Haven't had any more questions, but my key takeaways for today are to, hi Liz has popped up there to remind me we are getting towards the end. Play the long game with technology investment. Think about it. If it can be accelerated during COVID to feed an immediate answer, then absolutely brilliant. If you can convince the business that there is a long game there as well. Investigate any tax breaks that you may qualify for. And if you do need to invest in a temporary solution to cope with COVID, try to look for the longer term benefits to help justify the expense. Use the technology that you have to its best advantage, and don't store data just for the sake of it. Just make sure that the data you're collecting is useful. And finally, don't forget, we are in hospitality. Without guests, as we all now know firsthand, we are just empty buildings. We must not lose sight of our guests. As I said, I'm really happy to answer any questions. I think it's 9:27, so we've got 3 minutes, either now, or if you want to contact me afterwards, that's absolutely fine as well. So we're just on the hospital website, or if you know my email address, that's great, or I'm sure Liz will share that with anybody if they've got a question related to this. Liz.
Yeah, definitely. If anyone does want to get in contact with Jane post-event, do contact us and we'll put you guys in touch and make an introduction, and you can further the conversation on from there. And as I said, the session is recorded as well, so we can share that with Jane if any of you want to take anything away from it. So I don't know, I'll check if there's any more questions. I don't think there is. So if anyone hasn't got any more questions, then we can wrap the session up there. And then, as I said, we can you can carry on the conversation post-event if you want to do so. But if you did want to pop your email in the chat box, Jane, you can do, so people can take it and then they can see it now if you wanted to do that.
Yeah, I can do that. That's absolutely fine.
There's Hannah has wrote, can they have a list of the products and makers which were mentioned?
Yes. Was there a particular one?
You mean, sorry, Hannah, do you mean from this session or from the event in general? From this session, I think Hannah means. That's right. If you contact us, then we'll get that done for you. Whether I'm not sure whether you're speaking to Jane or myself. Jane's put her email address in there, so if it is for Jane, Hannah, contact Jane on that email address, and then if it's for me, then contact me and I'll help you with that. But if anyone does want Jane's email, if you open the chat box now, it is in there. It's hospa@hospa.org. Lovely. Brilliant. Well, thanks so much, Jane, for hosting our first session. Thanks, everyone, for joining. And you've got 10 minutes now until your first meetings start, if you have a meeting at 9:40. So do grab yourself a tea or coffee, have a quick break, and then we will make a start. But thanks again, Jane. Thanks, everyone, for joining us, and I hope you have a good day.
Thank you. Thanks, Liz. Thanks for the opportunity, and have a great day, everyone. Thank you.